Most women will never walk straight up to a man and say, "I like you. Go ahead and make a move." That's simply not how real-life interactions usually unfold, especially in everyday American social settings like coffee shops, college campuses, or casual gatherings. Instead, what happens is far more subtle and often completely overlooked. Let's imagine a scenario. Jason is 27, working as a graphic designer in Austin, Texas. One afternoon, he's sitting in a local cafe when a woman named Emily, 25, takes the seat across from him at a shared table. They exchange a few polite words. Nothing extraordinary. But what Jason doesn't realize is that Emily is already communicating far more than her words suggest. Not through what she says, but through what she does. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men don't want to hear. If you don't understand these subtle signals, you'll miss your moment. And while you're still trying to figure things out, someone else who notices these cues will naturally step in. This isn't about luck. It's about awareness. According to research published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior, more than 90% of emotional communication between two people happens without spoken language. That means the most important conversation happening between Jason and Emily isn't verbal at all. It's silent. It's physical. It's happening through small movements, posture, and especially through her hands. And most men, they never learned how to read it. Now let's clear something up. Women are not nearly as complicated as they're often made out to be. In fact, they tend to communicate quite clearly, just not in the way most men expect. The real issue is not that the signals are hidden. The issue is that no one ever taught you how to recognize them. And that's where things begin to change. What you're about to understand isn't recycled advice or generic dating tips. This comes from behavioral psychology, observational studies, and real-life patterns that show up consistently in social interactions across the United States, from college campuses in California to networking events in New York. Let's go back to Jason and Emily. As they talk, Emily casually reaches up and adjusts her hair. At first glance, it seems meaningless. Maybe the air conditioner is blowing, maybe it's just a habit. Jason barely notices it. But here's what he doesn't know. There is a major difference between a woman quickly fixing her hair for practical reasons and repeatedly touching or playing with it during a conversation. When that action happens more than once, when she gently moves it to one side, wraps a strand around her finger, or brings it forward over her shoulder, it often signals something deeper. It's not planned. It's not calculated. It's automatic. From a psychological standpoint, this behavior is connected to increased internal energy. When someone feels engaged, interested, or slightly excited in a social interaction, their body looks for small ways to release that energy. The hands become active. And one of the most common places that energy goes is the hair. So when Emily continues to adjust and play with her hair while maintaining the conversation, she's not just passing time. Her body is responding to the interaction. She may not even realize she's doing it. Now here's the key detail Jason misses. If it happens once, it means nothing. If it keeps happening, especially while she's focused on him, it means everything. There's another layer to this as well. When she moves her hair to one side, it subtly opens up her posture. It creates a more relaxed and approachable presence. Again, not something she consciously decides. It's simply how human behavior works under certain emotional conditions. And here's where most men get it wrong. They wait for clear verbal confirmation. They wait for obvious signals. They wait for certainty. But real connection doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with awareness. Jason keeps talking, unaware that Emily has already shown multiple signs of engagement. To him, it's just a normal conversation. To her, it's becoming something more interesting. And this is where timing matters. Because moments like this don't stay open forever. When you miss subtle cues repeatedly, the interaction slowly loses energy. Not because she changed her mind, but because the connection was never acknowledged or developed. Understanding this isn't about manipulation or trying to win someone over. It's about being present enough to recognize when someone is open, comfortable, and engaged with you. That's it. Back in the cafe, Emily eventually checks her phone, finishes her coffee, and gets ready to leave. She smiles politely and says, "Nice talking to you." Jason nods, smiles back, and watches her walk out. He thinks, she seemed nice. And that's where the story ends for him. But what he doesn't realize is that the opportunity was there. Not obvious. Not loud. But definitely present. He just didn't see it. Because he was listening to words instead of observing behavior. And that's the first shift you need to make. Start paying attention not just to what is said but to what is shown. Because more often than not, that's where the real message is. Let's continue with Jason. But this time a different setting. A few days after the cafe encounter, Jason attends a small weekend gathering at a friend's apartment in Chicago. It's relaxed, a mix of coworkers and friends. Music in the background, people talking in small groups, nothing too loud or overwhelming. That's where he meets Olivia. Olivia is 26, works in marketing, and has an easygoing personality. She joins a conversation Jason is already part of. At first, it's just casual, laughing at a shared story, exchanging a few opinions. Nothing stands out on the surface. But just like before, something else is happening beneath the words. As Olivia listens to Jason speak, she lifts her hand and lightly touches the side of her neck. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would immediately grab attention. Just a brief, almost absent-minded gesture. Jason notices it, but he doesn't think much of it. That's the mistake. Because gestures like this often carry meaning far beyond what they appear to be. The neck is one of the most sensitive and unprotected areas of the human body. From a psychological and biological perspective, people instinctively guard it in unfamiliar or uncomfortable situations. So when someone casually draws attention to that area, especially in a relaxed and open way, it usually signals comfort. Not forced comfort. Not polite tolerance. Real comfort. As the conversation continues, Olivia repeats the gesture. This time, her fingers move slightly along her collarbone before dropping back to her side. She maintains eye contact, nods as Jason talks, and leans in just a little. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to show engagement. Again, none of this is planned. It's natural. And that's exactly why it matters. Many men are taught to look for big, obvious signs, clear compliments, direct invitations, or bold statements. But in reality, attraction and interest are often expressed in much smaller, quieter ways. Jason, like most people, is focused on the conversation itself. He's thinking about what to say next, how he sounds, whether he's being interesting. Meanwhile, Olivia's body language is already communicating that she feels at ease around him. That's an important detail. Because comfort is the foundation of any meaningful connection. Without it, nothing develops. Now, something else begins to happen. As the group laughs at a joke, Olivia briefly touches her lips, just a quick motion almost like she's thinking. A moment later, she reaches for her drink, maintaining eye contact with Jason for a second longer than necessary. Again, subtle. Easy to miss. But not random. When someone draws attention to their face, especially areas like the lips, it often reflects a heightened level of awareness in the interaction. It's not about trying to send a bold message. It's about focusing attention, even if unconsciously. In social psychology, these kinds of gestures are often linked to engagement and attentiveness. The person is fully present in the moment, and their body reflects that presence. Jason notices the eye contact this time. Feels slightly different, more focused, more intentional. He pauses for a second before continuing the conversation. That pause matters. Because awareness, even in small moments, can shift the entire dynamic. Now let's move a bit further into the interaction. The group begins to break apart as people grab drinks or check their phones. The conversation narrows until it's mostly just Jason and Olivia standing near the kitchen counter. That's when another signal appears. Olivia reaches up and adjusts her necklace. She doesn't just fix it once. She lightly holds it between her fingers, moving it back and forth while listening to Jason talk. At first glance, it might seem like a simple habit. But repeated movements like this often indicate something deeper. When a person feels a mix of excitement and nervous energy in a social situation, their body looks for small outlets to manage that energy. This can show up as fidgeting, touching objects, adjusting accessories, or making repetitive hand movements. It's not discomfort in a negative sense. It's activation, a sign that the interaction matters to them. Jason notices the movement but doesn't connect it to anything meaningful. He assumes she's just distracted or absent-minded. In reality, it's the opposite. She's engaged. Very engaged. Now, here's where things become even more clear. As Jason makes a light joke, Olivia laughs. And for a brief moment, she reaches out and touches his arm. It's quick, natural, almost effortless, but it changes everything. Physical contact, even in a casual social setting, is not random, especially between people who are still getting to know each other. Crossing that boundary even briefly shows a level of comfort and openness that goes beyond simple politeness. Jason feels it, but he freezes slightly. Not outwardly. He keeps talking. But internally, he doesn't respond to the moment. He doesn't acknowledge it. He lets it pass. And that's where many interactions lose momentum. Because when someone reaches out, literally or figuratively, they're opening a small door. Not a dramatic one. Not a guaranteed one. But an opportunity nonetheless. If that moment isn't recognized, the connection often stays where it is, or slowly fades. Olivia pulls her hand back naturally, continuing the conversation as if nothing happened. On the surface, everything seems the same, but the energy has shifted slightly. Not dramatically, just enough. Jason had a chance to meet her halfway in that moment, to respond with the same level of openness. Not with anything exaggerated, just with awareness. A small smile. A slight lean in. Even a brief acknowledgement. Instead, he stayed neutral. Safe. And while safe feels comfortable, it rarely creates momentum. As the night continues, the conversation remains pleasant. They exchange a few more stories, laugh a bit more, and eventually join the rest of the group again. Before leaving, Olivia says goodbye with a friendly smile. "Nice meeting you," she says. Jason replies the same. And just like that, the moment passes. No awkwardness. No rejection. Just misconnection. But here's the important part. Nothing Olivia did was confusing. Every signal was consistent. Comfort through posture. Engagement through eye contact. Interest through small, repeated gestures. Connection through touch. The pattern was there. And patterns are what matter, not isolated actions. Because anyone can make a single gesture without meaning. But when multiple signals align over time, they form a clear picture. The difference between noticing that picture and missing it entirely often comes down to one thing. Attention. Not forced analysis. Not overthinking. Just being present enough to observe what's already happening. Because in most real-life interactions, the signals are there. They're just quieter than people expect. A week later, Jason finds himself in yet another familiar situation. This time at a small downtown restaurant in Denver. It's early evening, not too crowded, the kind of place where conversations feel a little more personal without trying too hard. He's sitting across from a woman named Rachel. Rachel is 28, works in real estate, and has a calm, observant presence. This isn't their first interaction. They met briefly through mutual friends. But this is the first time they've had a chance to actually sit down and talk one-on-one. First, everything feels normal. They go over the usual topics: work, hobbies, how the city's been treating them. Nothing feels forced, but nothing feels particularly memorable either. At least that's how Jason sees it. What he doesn't realize is that Rachel's body language has already begun telling a much more detailed story. As the conversation settles into a rhythm, Rachel picks up her glass of water. Instead of simply taking a sip and putting it down, her fingers stay on the rim for a moment longer. She slowly traces the edge with her fingertip, almost absent-mindedly, while maintaining eye contact with Jason. Then she sets it down. A few minutes later, she does it again. Jason notices it this time, but he brushes it off. Maybe she's just thinking. Maybe it's a random habit. But repeated behaviors like this rarely happen without a reason. When someone becomes emotionally engaged in a conversation, especially in a setting where there's potential for connection, their body often channels that energy into small, repetitive movements. Objects nearby, glasses, cups, utensils, become subtle outlets for that energy. It's not about the object itself. It's about what the interaction is creating internally. Rachel isn't trying to send a message. Her body is simply responding. Now, here's where things get more interesting. As Jason continues talking, Rachel begins to mirror certain aspects of his behavior. When he leans forward slightly, she does the same. When he pauses, she holds eye contact just a fraction longer before responding. This kind of mirroring is one of the most natural signs of alignment between two people. It doesn't happen consciously. It happens when someone feels in sync with the person in front of them. Jason starts to feel a shift, but he can't quite explain it. The conversation feels smoother now. Easier. Like there's less effort involved. That's not accidental. That's what alignment feels like. A few minutes later, something else happens. Rachel adjusts her jacket slightly, smoothing the fabric along her arms before settling back into her seat. Shortly after, she checks her posture, sitting a bit more upright, then relaxes again. At first glance, it might seem like simple self-adjustment, but context matters. If someone makes these adjustments before an interaction begins, it's usually just routine. But when it happens during a conversation, especially after eye contact or moments of engagement, it often signals awareness. She's paying attention to how she presents herself. Not for everyone in the room. For him. Jason catches this one. He notices the timing, even if he doesn't fully understand it. Something about the interaction feels more intentional now. More focused. But instead of leaning into that moment, he does what most people do. He plays it safe. He keeps the conversation at the same level. Comfortable. Neutral. Meanwhile, Rachel continues to show consistent signs of engagement. At one point, Jason shares a story about a recent trip. As he talks, Rachel rests her chin lightly on her hand, her elbow on the table. She's facing him directly, eyes steady, a small smile forming as she listens. Jason hesitates for a second. A thought crosses his mind. Is she bored? And this is where misinterpretation changes everything. Because that gesture, resting her chin while maintaining eye contact, is rarely a sign of disinterest when paired with active listening. In fact, it often means the opposite. It shows focus, presence, a willingness to stay in the moment. Rachel isn't checking her phone. She isn't scanning the room. She isn't looking for an exit. She's right there, fully engaged. But Jason doubts the moment instead of trusting what he sees. And doubt creates distance, even when connection is possible. As the evening continues, Rachel begins to ask more personal questions. Nothing intrusive, just slightly deeper than surface-level conversation. What motivates him? What he enjoys outside of work? What kind of experiences he values? These questions aren't random. They show curiosity. And curiosity is a form of investment. Jason answers, but he keeps things light. He doesn't match the depth. He stays on safe ground, avoiding anything that might feel too revealing. Again, comfortable but limited. Eventually, the server brings the check. Rachel reaches for her purse, but Jason insists on covering it. She smiles, thanks him, and doesn't argue. They step outside together. There's a brief pause, one of those moments where something could happen, but neither person is quite sure which direction it will go. Rachel stands there for a second, looking at him, waiting. Not for anything dramatic, just for a signal. Something that shows he recognized the connection that had been building throughout the evening. But Jason, still unsure, keeps it simple. Well, it was nice seeing you again, he says. Rachel nods, smiles politely, and replies, yeah, you too. And just like that, the moment closes. No tension. No awkwardness. Just a quiet ending to something that had potential. Here's what matters most in all of this. Rachel didn't rely on words to show interest. She showed it through consistency, through repeated behaviors, through alignment, attention, and presence. From the way she interacted with objects, to how she mirrored his movements, to how she maintained eye contact and leaned into the conversation. The signals were there the entire time. Not loud, not obvious, but clear enough for someone paying attention. And that's the difference. Because recognizing a single gesture doesn't change anything. But recognizing a pattern, that changes everything. Jason didn't miss one signal. He missed the pattern. And when you miss the pattern, you miss the meaning behind it. Real connection isn't built on one moment. It's built on a series of small moments that point in the same direction. The question is never, did she do one thing? The real question is, did she show consistent signs over time? Because when the answer is yes, that's when you know something real is there. At this point, you've seen the pattern unfold across different situations. Jason didn't fail because he said the wrong thing. He didn't lose connection because he lacked confidence in a dramatic way. And he definitely didn't miss out because women were unclear. What actually happened is much simpler and much more common. He didn't recognize the signals when they appeared consistently. And more importantly, he didn't respond when it mattered. Let's step back for a moment. Across the cafe in Austin, the apartment in Chicago, and the restaurant in Denver, 3 different women, Emily, Olivia, and Rachel, each showed their own version of interest. None of them used direct words. None of them made bold declarations. But all of them communicated the same thing through patterns. Emily showed it through repeated gestures and relaxed presence. Olivia showed it through comfort, subtle touch, and engagement. Rachel showed it through alignment, attention, and emotional focus. Different personalities, different environments, same underlying message. And that's the key most people overlook. Attraction, or even simple interest, rarely appears as one big, undeniable signal. It shows up as a series of small, consistent behaviors that point in the same direction. Now here's where everything shifts. Recognizing those signals is only half the equation. What you do next is what actually determines the outcome. Because awareness without action doesn't create connection. It just creates missed opportunities with better understanding. So what should Jason have done differently? Not anything extreme. Not anything rehearsed. Just something real. Let's go back to one of those moments. When Olivia lightly touched his arm at the gathering, that was an opening. Not a guarantee, not a commitment, just a moment of connection. A simple response could have changed everything. A brief smile. Holding eye contact for a second longer. Leaning in slightly instead of pulling back internally. That's it. Not a performance. Just acknowledgement. Because when someone reaches out, physically or emotionally, they're not expecting perfection. They're looking for reciprocity. The same applies to Rachel at the restaurant. When she leaned in, asked deeper questions, and stayed fully present, she was creating space for something more meaningful. Jason didn't need a perfect line. He just needed to meet her at the same level. To open up a little. To respond with the same depth she was offering. Instead, he stayed on the surface. And surface-level responses can't sustain deeper connection. Now, here's something important to understand. Responding doesn't mean forcing something. It doesn't mean assuming every signal guarantees interest. It simply means being aware enough to move forward naturally when the moment invites it. Because real connection is always mutual. It builds step by step. One person shows a little openness. The other person meets it. Then it grows. Or it doesn't. But it never grows when one side stays completely neutral. That's where many people get stuck. They wait for certainty. They wait for unmistakable proof. They wait until there's no risk of misunderstanding. But by the time everything is obvious, the moment is usually gone. Because connection doesn't wait for perfect clarity. It responds to presence. Let's be clear about something else. None of this is about trying to read minds or overanalyze every movement. That approach creates tension and makes interactions feel unnatural. This is about noticing patterns. When someone consistently shows comfort, attention, and engagement, when their body language aligns with the moment, when their actions match their presence, that's when you lean in just a little. Not aggressively, not awkwardly, just enough to show you're there too. Now imagine a different version of Jason. Same cafe, same conversation with Emily, but this time he notices the repeated gestures. He sees the engagement. And instead of staying passive, he simply becomes more present. He slows down, maintains eye contact, allows the conversation to breathe instead of rushing through it. And when the moment feels right, he says something simple like, "I've enjoyed talking with you. Would you like to continue this another time?" No pressure. No performance. Just clarity. That alone changes the entire outcome. Because now, instead of wondering what might have happened, he creates the opportunity for something to continue. That's the difference awareness makes when it's combined with action. And here's the final piece most people miss. Respect always comes first. Not every signal means interest. Not every interaction leads somewhere. And that's okay. The goal isn't to chase every possibility. The goal is to recognize when something genuine is happening and respond in a way that is honest, calm, and respectful. Because the strongest connections are never built on pressure or assumption. They're built on mutual recognition. Two people noticing the same thing at the same time and choosing to move forward together. Everything you've seen, gestures, posture, small movements, moments of attention, these are not tricks or shortcuts. They're part of how humans naturally communicate. Quietly, consistently, without needing to say everything out loud. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, whether it's in a cafe, at a gathering, or across a table, pay attention. Not in a forced way. Just notice. Notice the patterns. Notice the consistency. Notice how the other person shows up. And most importantly, notice how you respond. Because at the end of the day, connection doesn't come from saying the perfect thing. It comes from being present enough to recognize when something real is already there. And having the confidence to meet it halfway. That's it. No tricks. No complicated strategies. Just awareness, timing, and genuine response. And once you understand that, you stop missing the moments that matter.